Morning class. Sorry for being late today. I hope everybody has joined. So we can start off the class. Today's topic is very interesting. Today's topic is chronic kidney disease. Again, we talked about the acute kidney disease in the last class, or rather the acute kidney injury, and now today to take up the sequelae from there, we'll start on chronic kidney disease, which is again very common and a predominant condition in a law. Globally, it's a very predominant and devastating condition, and it has to be managed very systematically. And without losing any time, we'll start with the topic. So chronic kidney disease, first we'll talk about the what is actually chronic kidney disease. We talked about the acute renal injury. Today we're talking about the chronic kidney disease, which is any progressive and irreversible loss of kidney function. So the term is progressive, and the second thing is irreversible. So these two forms a major pillar as far as the chronic kidney disease is concerned, and so they can be defined either in the presence of kidney damage, which can be a functional or a pathological or a structural, and it will be invariably be associated with GFR less than 60 ml per minute for 3 months or longer. But this actual definition has been a little modified, as we'll see in the next few slides. This is a very traditional way of putting it up. Incidence of CKD, as I said, we have there is a lot of morbidity, and it's a very important clinical scenario as far as the chronic kidney disease is concerned, as the number of patients, there has been a robust evolution as far as the number of patients diabetic and hypertensive are concerned. There has been invariably on the similar lines, we have robust evolutions of patients with chronic kidney diseases. And according to the nephrology dialysis transplantation, there is almost 8 million CRF patients in India, and most commonly worldwide, globally, or India, it is diabetes nephropathy, which leads to CKD. Second one is the hypertension, and then the other causes like chronic glomerulonephritis and chronic interstitial diseases and ischemic nephropathy, obstructive uropathy. They all constitute the other spectrum. So very interestingly, the CKD is estimated to be more common in women than in men, but that percentage is not very substantial. So again, talking about the criterias, very importantly, this the 3-month slab is a very important thing to remember. Any markers of kidney damage, and the markers of kidney damage can be in the form of enhanced, those are decreased GFR or albuminuria in the urine, or dyslipidemia, or abnormal serum creatinine, and these are all the very important markers which should be present for more than 3 months, and that duration of 3 months is based on documentation. So that means that this decision is very necessary to distinguish chronic form from the acute form, and it helps us to documentation of the duration, and so that's why again the history is also very important as far as documentation is concerned. So markers of kidney damage, as I said, can be albuminuria or urinary sediment abnormalities, any electrolyte or other abnormalities due to tubular disorders, any pathological or structural abnormalities which can be detected by either by the biopsy or by the imaging, and of course any history of kidney transplant. So the criteria for CKD is again, it has been again stressed on that basically the GFR should be less than 60 ml per minute, but not necessarily, as we'll see in the next few slides, how the new classification have just has very minutely altered this definition. But this is one overall, since the GFR is the overall best index for the kidney function in health and diseases. So you can safely infer, if there is a GFR less than 60 ml per minute for 1.73 meters square, you can safely infer that's a case of a CKD. And normal GFR, as you know, in a young adult is usually 125 ml per minute, 1.73 meters square. And as we talked about the acute kidney failure, the chronic kidney failure, or end-stage renal disease, where the GFR is less than 15 ml per minute, 1.73 meter per square, and this is what leads to uremia and uremic symptoms. And then you can have equate for estimating the GFR. You can have serum creatinine or serum cystatin C values, which can be used. And so very importantly, when you talk about the CKD, the reviewing of the past history and the previous measurements are very important, because if the duration is more than 3 months, you can always say that it is a confirmed CKD. But if it's not clear, then you have to look for other tests and abnormalities and structural and functional imaging to come at a diagnosis, and you have to monitor these changes for the span of 3 months. So the most important measurements, and as per se, when we talk about the kidney function and assessment of kidney damage, is eGFR and albuminuria. This is the most important thing you should remember, that if you want to really brand somebody as a chronic kidney disease patient, the most important thing you have to look for is the eGFR and albuminuria. And traditionally, the GFR is a test of renal function, and test of renal damage is protein in the urine. Normally, the amount of protein in the urine is as minimal as less than 15 milligram for 24 hours. But in cases of renal damage, it can increase, and the values we'll see in the next few slides. So GFR is basically it denotes the glomerular filtration rate, that is the as the blood flows through the afferent arteriole to the efferent arteriole as it goes through the glomerulus, and this is basically the amount of filter and the rate of filtration through the glomerulus into the tubules. So this is how the sum of filtration rates in all of the functioning nephron is being considered, and it is not routinely measured in a clinical setting. Of course, the GFR is not routinely measured in the clinical setting. It is measured only in the suspected cases, or as a screening protocol for certain morbid conditions. So eventually you can always conclude that the estimation of eGFR, it gives a rough measure of number of functioning nephrons. As you know, the nephrons is made up of glomeruli and tubules, afferent and efferent arterioles. These numerous individual nephrons is make up for the eGFR. So there has been a very important clinically, these two are the methods how you will estimate an GFR, and the most importantly is very relevant and used in the clinical practice is the Cobb-Crawford-Gault equation, where the formula is basically 140 minus age into the body weight upon 72 into serum creatinine, and this multiplied by 0.85 if it's female, and this is because the female mass or the female mass ratio is lesser than the male. And the second thing is, very importantly, since GFR depends on, or It's an estimation of glomerular filtration, and the serum creatinine is being considered for estimation. Just a minute. Hello? हाँ, क्लास ले रहा हूँ मैं क्लास छोड़ के थोड़ी आ सकता हूँ, देखता हूँ. The most importantly, where we use serum creatinine for estimation of GFR, and you have to remember this formula is very important: 140 minus age into body weight upon 72 into serum creatinine. And more importantly, we should consider that this value takes into consideration the age, the sex, the body stature, the weight of the patient, or the body mass of the patient. That is how these are the few parameters which really on which depends the serum creatinine values, and or they alter serum creatinine, or basically except for the height, these all parameters are being considered in this while estimating this GFR. So as you can see, the serum creatinine concentration, age, sex, race and body weight all are considered, since the serum creatinine is being affected by the basic structure of the or the body mass or the age of the patient. As we know, as the age proceeds, the serum creatinine value comes down, and as there are more muscular patient, the serum creatinine will be more, because serum creatinine is an end product of the muscle catabolism, and then depends on the even the sex and the race. Also, they are also an important determinant as far as the serum creatinine is concerned. So these all parameters have been taken into consideration as far as this equation is concerned. So, and depending on the GFR, the classification has been where the stage 0 is a GFR more than 90, stage 1 is this is a very important secondary classification which is follows worldwide, where stage 0 is more than 90 GFR, stage 1 is more than 90 or up to 90, stage 2 is 60 to 89 GFR, stage 3 is 30 to 59, and stage 4 is 15 to 29, and 5 is, this is an end stage renal disease, which is GFR less than 15. And similarly, the basis for proteinuria or albuminuria is basically because the larger proteins, the glomerular basement membrane basically it refrains the larger proteins from entering the tubules. So when there is a damage to the filter, we'll talk about the pathophysiology later on. This will lead to allow certain protein, especially the albumin, to get secreted through the tubules and appear in the urine. And so this increased urine protein is a sure shot sign of kidney injury. So definition of albuminuria, traditionally we used to have a term called microalbuminuria and macroalbuminuria. This term has been taken care of now. Now we have a newer terms where it's a moderately increased albuminuria or severely increased albuminuria, and where the 24-hour typical a very traditional 24-hour urine albumin ratio is usually considered when it is less than 30 milligram per day. It is usually maybe mildly increased or normal albuminuria. But if the albumin content of the excreted urine in 24-hour urine is 30 to 300 milligram, then it is considered moderately increased. Or if the albumin content in the 24-hour urine collection is more than 300 milligram per day, it is severely increased. So this microalbuminuria and macroalbuminuria term has been done away with. Then there is something which has taken or rather which has attracted attention of all the clinicians worldwide, and which have given a special stress is the spot urine albumin creatinine ratio, where you don't have to have this process of cumbersome process of collecting 24-hour urine, where there are chances of under collection and over collection, and there are chances of missing out on on collecting every time you go and pee. So the best thing is the spot urine albumin creatinine ratio, which has uh, uh, been now been instituted in the new this definition of CKD, where you have less than 30 milligram per gram of creatinine is a mild to moderately increased albuminuria. If you have 30 to 300 milligram per gram of creatinine albumin, then that is a moderately increased albuminuria. And if you have urine albumin to creatinine more than 300 milligram per gram of creatinine, then you have severely increased microalbuminuria. KDIGO, which is a this is international organization which take care of all the latest guidelines, which says this anything less than 17 milligram per gram of albumin in a spot urine albumin creatinine ratio is again considered as normal to mildly increased albuminuria. 25 is again in women is considered mild to normal to mildly increased albuminuria, and similarly these are the values been put up by the KDIGO. So this is a special staging technique or the diagnose or clinical for the clinical definition which has been developed by the KDIGO, which because as we have seen in the last lecture, so there are a lot of patients of AKI, they progress to CKD. So the early arrest in the progression of CKD is very important when the patient with the comorbid conditions, especially with hypertension and diabetes, and they have to be properly assessed there, because there are so many patients who fall under the category of mild kidney or a stage or early kidney chronic kidney disease, and which when not taken care of at the right time, they can eventually very easily proceed to CKD stage 2, 3, or even they might after over a period of might present you with a very severe CKD. So in order to specially screen such patients who are who meet the definition of CKD but who missed out on a clinical scenario, so we have this newer definition where the color coding is green, yellow, orange and red, and this is something like dark red. So with the green is a very mild, and the progression chances of progression are very less, and the yellow are something like chances of progression is very high, and the orange is again chances of very, if it's severely high, and the red or the deep red, this is a color coding for especially for the patient to be considered for renal replacement therapy. So this is the how the color coding. Always remember the green is for the mild cases who might continue in the same stage. Yellow, they have a high progression, high chances of progression to the next stage, and yellow is a very severe one, and they can lead to an end stage renal disease. And this is at this point we should start planning for renal replacement therapy, or we can start counseling the patients. And stage 3, stage 4 is the scenario where you have to decide on renal replacement therapy in the form of dialysis or renal transplant. Then GFR is the G1 is when you have the filtration more than 90, when the GFR is 60 to 89, it is called G2. Then the third stage has been split into two, where the G3 is 45 to 59 GFR and G3B is 30 to 45 GFR, and then the G4 is 15 to 29 GFR, and G5 less than 15 is called kidney failure or end stage kidney disease. And similarly, the albuminuria has been taken on the x-axis. So the albuminuria where you have mild, where there is less than 30 milligram per gram of creatinine, where the albumin if more 30 to 300 milligram per gram of creatinine is moderately increased, or if the albumin is severely increased, if it is spot albumin creatinine ratio is more than 300 milligram per creatinine. And based on these two parameters, we classify different patients under different stages. This is for GFR and India. Well, I'm taking so much time on defining the CKD because it's very important for you to understand when is to label CKD, just not for your exam purpose but also for your clinical purpose. So, as I talked about, these normal patients who have an increased risk for CKD, you need to have an early screening for such patients. Once the damage is sets in, it will lead to slow progression, and once the GFR decreases, the patient might start off with complications, and we have to start preparing and counseling the patient at this stage itself before the patient go in for the kidney failure and urgent replacement. So severe form of kidney failure is when GFR is less than 15, and it is also synonymous with uremia when uremic symptoms like uremic bleeding, pericarditis, or uremic encephalopathy sets in, and where or it can also be, the other name is the end stage renal disease, where the only thing to be considered is the renal replacement therapy. So leading cause of CKD worldwide and even in India, it is diabetes, hypertension, obstructive urine flow, especially the BPH in older ages, the kidney diseases or glomerulosclerosis, or all different kind of inherent kidney diseases, then kidney artery stenosis, certain toxins, then fetal development problems like polycystic kidney diseases, then connective tissues, SLE, and malaria and yellow fever. They are also very much important causes for CKD, especially in the Indian scenario. Then some medications, the NSAIDs, which been used on a very regular basis by a wide majority of people. Illegal substance abuse like heroin or cocaine, and then the injury or physical injury to the kidney. So similarly, risk factors are the diabetes, the most important risk factor, hypertension, cardiovascular diseases, obesity, age and rest, acute kidney injury, malignancy, family history of CKD, kidney stones, infection like hepatitis C and HIV, autoimmune diseases, nephrotoxins like NSAIDs. These are all the important risk factors for the CKD. And the leading categories of etiology is again a diabetic glomerular disease, glomerulonephritis, hypertensive nephropathy, primary glomerulopathy with hypertension, then vascular and ischemic renal diseases in the form of connective tissue disorders and other vascular pathologies, then autosomal dominant PCD, polycystic kidney diseases, then other cystic and tubular interstitial nephropathy. So basically, the pathophysiology in the chronic kidney disease, will see what actually happens. There will be a two broad sets of mechanism of damage. Either it will be a sets of progressive mechanism where you will have hyperfiltration and hypertrophy of the viable nephrons, and so as there will be increased intestinal activity of the RAS axis. What actually happens, especially in the diabetic or hypertensive, they all have a different mechanism, but the common pathway is basically the adaptive hyperfiltration, which leading to the hypertrophy of the nephrons. And as there is a hypertrophy of the nephrons, as you can see in hypertension, there is an afferent arterial sclerosis. We'll see from the diagram in the next few slides. So there will be a decrease in GFR, and in order to compensate for the decrease in GFR, there will be hypertrophy or hyperfiltration for hypertrophy of the nephrons. And as the hypertrophy of the nephrons takes place, there will be ensuing sclerosis because of the increase in tissue growth factor beta, and that ensuing tissue growth factor beta leads to mesangial expansion in extracellular tissue deposition, and leading to further sclerosis, and eventually there will be decrease in GFR. So this is the afferent arteriole, and if there is any problem with the afferent arteriole, what is an hypertensive atherosclerosis or vascular ischemic damage with the decrease in blood flow to the nephrons, that will lead to ischemic or perfusion-induced damage. Or there may be there's something called hyaline arterial sclerosis of the efferent arteriole, especially in diabetes, which leads to increased pressure on the nephrons and leading to the hyperfiltration. So these are the basically are the oxidative and inflammatory damage which leads to sclerosis and damage in endothelium. So we are talking at the individual nephron levels, and this will lead to sclerosis, and so will be marked decrease in GFR and leading to further dysfunction and the function of the kidney as far as other parameters are concerned. So basically we know the as far as the biochemistry uremia is concerned, we know the urea and creatinine are the only thing which we know about how to measure the to assess the excretory capacity of the kidney and the accumulation of these two molecules, but they don't can determine all the symptoms and the signs of uremic syndrome in advanced renal failure, because there are hundreds of toxins which gets accumulated in the renal failure, and since because of that the serum urea and creatinine are not to be considered as far as considering a case of CKD is concerned, because that would lead to oversimplification of the uremic stage. So what happens, you have so many waste products, there are hundreds of toxins which is being excreted by the kidney, and since if there will be a damage to the nephrons, there will be elevation of these waste products, and that there is also a host of metabolic endocrine function which is normally performed by the kidney, and this will also get impaired, and that will be anemia with with decrease in erythropoietin levels, malnutrition with cachexia, and abnormal metabolism of carbohydrates, fats and proteins. Then there will be certain hormones which will lead to abnormal regulation of hormones, especially the parathyroid hormone, when leading to bony deformities and also functional problems of the bone. Then FGF23, insulin which is being degraded or excreted by the kidney, glucagon levels and other steroid hormones levels, and especially the prolactin hormone level. So the sphere of dysfunction basically in uremic will be any uremic syndrome will be progressive systemic inflammation, homeostasis and toxins. So always remember there will be an accumulation of toxins which normally undergoes renal excretion, and there will be including the certain products of protein metabolism, and that with the eventual loss of the kidney function, there will be fluid and electrolytic imbalances and hormone regulations, and with systemic inflammation in progression, there will be even vascular and nutritional consequences. So these are the multiple function of the kidney which we know about: the excretion of metabolic waste products and foreign chemicals, regulation of water and electrolytic balances, regulation of body fluid osmolarity and electrolyte concentration, regulation of arterial blood pressure, regulation of acid-base balance, secretion, metabolism and excretion of hormones, and gluconeogenesis. So this is all the things we'll talk about all this complications and how to manage the complication, and the clinical presentation related to all these complications in the next slide, where we'll talk about the clinical features and we'll touch on several the most important complications, how to manage these complications as in the form of sodium balance, potassium excretion, acid excretion, and calcium phosphate balance and erythropoiesis. So this all for today now. We'll take up this the next section on CKD in the next class. So any question you have, please let me know. I wanted to be very clear with the definition of CKD, and then we can talk about the clinical symptoms and the complications in the next class, and how to manage them. It's a big topic. I'll try to simplify it. Okay, thank you so much. We'll meet in the next class.